The sun dappled the neighborhood in a wash of golden light, casting playful shadows on the neatly trimmed hedges that lined our quiet cul-de-sac. Each house stood uniform and proud, a testament to the rigid regulations of our illustrious homeowners association. A governing body that was no stranger to the grip of power and control. It was an idyllic scene, at least at first glance. But beneath the manicured lawns and picturesque facades lurked a sense of simmering tension fueled, in no small part, by the ever-watchful eye of Karen. Karen, our self-appointed HOA enforcer, reigned with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. Her presence was felt in every corner of the neighborhood. The way she patrolled the streets, peeking through curtains or making notes in her little black book, was reminiscent of a hawk circling its prey. Nothing escaped her scrutiny, certainly not the slightly faded paint on my shutters or the daisies that dared to creep beyond their allotted flower bed. I took it in stride. Mostly, it was easier that way. Resisting Karen was like spitting into the wind. It always came back to bite you. So when she sent yet another curt notice about my unkempt garden, I merely folded the letter, placed it in my desk drawer, and let it gather dust alongside its predecessors. Inner peace is woven from threads of patience, and I had learned to weave remarkably well. My garden, wild and vibrant, was a tapestry of colors to the uninformed eye, chaos to me, harmony. The azaleas tangled effortlessly with the wisteria, and every breeze sent them swaying in time. Nature's own symphony. Karen despised it. She preferred order, the kind that stifled life into submission. My garden, to her, was an affront. Then came the day she decided to escalate her campaign of rigor. The power flickered ominously at first. A hesitant gasp before plunging into darkness. I blinked, adjusting to the sudden void of light, and let the cool realization wash over me. She had done it. Karen had finally pulled the plug. Literally. I breathed in the silence that followed, instinctively reaching for a candle. The irony was rich. She imagined such a petty act would only inconvenience me. But there was a delicious twist she hadn't foreseen. The neighborhood, in its entirety, was cloaked in shadow. A symphony of surprise exclamations wafting through the open windows into the thickening dusk. A smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Consequences, like seeds, have a way of sprouting in unexpected directions. Karen had intended to prune my defiance, yet here we were, ensnared in the unintended consequence of her ambition. Perhaps she believed in her own invincibility too fiercely. The air hummed with a peculiar kind of quiet, an anticipation that lingered, entwined with the scent of possibility. The blackout stretched on, a testament to entwined fates and the human folly of control. And as I sat in the pale flicker of candlelight, I pondered the fragile balance of power, the vulnerabilities disguised as strength. Karen had cast her stone, but the ripples had yet to settle. What seeds might yet bloom from this tangled garden of events? The answer lay just beyond the horizon, waiting patiently for the dawn. The dawn broke softly, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, as if the world itself tried to soothe the chaos Karen had unleashed. The silence of the early morning was deceptive, like the calm before a storm. As I sipped my coffee, the bitter warmth comforting against the crisp air, I noticed the neighborhood bustling back to life. Generators hummed, their mechanical groans a reminder of the night's disruption. Karen's shadow loomed over everything, an uninvited guest in every conversation and shared glance. Her reign of petty tyranny had escalated. The HOA board meetings, once mundane affairs, now crackled with tension. Karen wielded the rule book like a scepter, her weapon of choice. Absurd regulations sprang up overnight, each more ridiculous than the last. Grass had to be precisely 2 inches high. Garden gnomes were suddenly deemed unsightly. Even wind chimes fell under her scrutiny. their gentle tinkling accused of disrupting the neighborhood's harmony. Citations became her love notes, slipped surreptitiously under doors, each one a symbol of her disapproval. I found one tucked into my mailbox, an official-looking envelope that felt oddly out of place among the usual bills and advertisements. The offense, a rogue dandelion daring to flourish in the corner of my lawn. It was laughable, really, the way she clung to control, as if rules could stitch together the frayed edges of her mind. Yet, the real weapon was her tongue. Whispered half-truths and wild speculations spread like wildfire, igniting suspicion and distrust. Karen's words were seeds of discord, sown with deliberate care. Neighbors who once greeted each other with warm smiles now exchanged wary nods, each wondering what story had been spun in their absence. In the midst of it all, I remained an observer, quietly navigating the turbulent waters of our community. My resolve was like a granite cliff against her relentless waves. There was a strange power in not reacting, a quiet defiance in maintaining calm. Karen thrived on confrontation, her energy fed by the frustration she provoked. I denied her that satisfaction, choosing instead to channel my thoughts into a different kind of resistance. The irony was delicious. Her attempt to control had spiraled wildly beyond her grasp, the neighborhood's unity crumbling under her authoritarian grasp. Did she realize that in her quest for order, she had sown chaos? It was a question that lingered, a shadow that danced just beyond her notice. But as the sun climbed higher, I knew the climax of this drama was yet to come. Karen's vision had been singular, her focus so intent on the rules that she had overlooked the simple truth lying beneath. The power that flowed through our neighborhood was not in her regulations, but in our shared stories and smiles. Her blackout had inadvertently illuminated the connections she sought to sever. As I watched, the neighborhood began to breathe again. The generators ceased their lament. Electricity restored. Yet, the true power was not in the restored current, but in the resilience of a community determined to reclaim its narrative. Karen's rules were paper, easily torn. We were flesh and blood, bound by more than her paltry edicts. The game was set. The stakes were clear. Karen had made her move. Now it was my turn on the board. I smiled. A small, determined curve of the lips. The next act was mine to dictate. The chaos unfolded with a delicious irony that tasted like sweet vindication. Karen, in her self-proclaimed wisdom and unchecked zeal, had decided that my power line was an unsightly blemish upon our pristine community. Her solution, as always, involved a pair of oversized garden shears and an absolute disregard for consequences. The resulting blackout spread like wildfire. An entire block plunged into darkness because of one petty crusade against nonconformity. I almost felt gratitude. Almost. But like any good tale, the hero must first harness patience, bide their time, and wait for the opportune moment to strike back with precision. I had learned this well. My training ground was a neighborhood ruled by an HOA tyrant, dictating the shade of our front doors and the height of our hedges. Karen, with her perpetual scowl, was queen. I documented everything, a detective in my own right, armed with a camera and the quiet resilience that comes from a lifetime of being underestimated. Every altercation, every absurd notice she taped to my door, every time her sharply manicured hands gestured wildly at something she disapproved of, evidence cataloged and stored like precious artifacts. Inside, my home was a sanctuary of calm. The low hum of the generator I'd installed after Karen's first offense kept the air cool and the clocks ticking. I pulled out the folder labeled Karen from my file cabinet, an arsenal of her own making, each sheet a tale of her overreach, her pettiness, her missteps. The night she cut the power, I sat in the dim light, pen in hand, preparing my countermove. When darkness fell, the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something it didn't know how to name. I could feel the shift coming, a pivot away from fear and toward something else, something with teeth. My plan was simple, really. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, armed with my meticulously organized dossier. I knew the board members well, their quirks and weaknesses, their desire for harmony and order. I offered them a chance to restore balance, to reclaim their neighborhood. From a tyrant who mistook her whims for rules, they listened. They saw. Irony dripped from the moment they announced Karen's temporary removal from her position, pending a thorough investigation. Her own laws, now turned against her. I watched from my window as she received the news, her face a mask of disbelief, then anger, then something that resembled fear. The neighborhood slowly flickered back to life, house by house. A patchwork quilt of light, shadows retreated, leaving behind a different kind of silence, a peaceful one. It was a new dawn, and the air felt charged with possibilities. Victory was mine, but it was a quiet triumph, the kind that tastes better when savored slowly. I brewed a cup of coffee, the aroma mingling with the scent of rain-soaked earth. As I stood at my window, watching the sun rise over the now tranquil neighborhood, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion is simply holding your ground and letting the storm pass. The night was a cloak of dark velvet stretched over the neighborhood, a stark contrast to the twinkling grid of lights we were so used to. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind against trees and the distant hum of traffic unaware of our plight. Each house stood like a shadowy monument to modern convenience, suddenly stripped of its spark, its essence. I sat by the window, watching the street, usually vibrant with the soft glow of porch lights and warm interiors peeking through curtains, was now a tableau of uneasy darkness. For once, the stars had their moment, unchallenged by the artificial glow that normally muted their brilliance. Inside, the air was tinged with a coolness that was both refreshing and foreboding. The power's absence was a palpable presence. It crept into every corner, turning the familiar into the foreign. Without the gentle hum of appliances, the house felt cavernous, echoing with a silence that felt like accusation. Outside, the neighbors slowly emerged, silhouettes against the blackened landscape. Their movements were tentative at first, like deer venturing out after a storm. The Johnsons were first, clutching flashlights, their beams cutting through the dark like lighthouses casting on a rolling sea. Others soon followed, their faces illuminated in brief, flickering glimpses, concern etched in shadows, and light. I could almost taste the growing unease. It was bitter and electric, a storm gathering momentum. Whispers carried through the still air questions, murmurs of disbelief, hypotheses as wild as they were improbable. It was a puzzle, and everyone was desperate for the missing piece. The irony was not lost on me. Karen had wielded the HOA regulations like a sword, severing my power with the precision of a zealot. Her gambit, an attempt to exert control, had spiraled out of her grasp, like a game of chess where the board is suddenly upended. The neighborhood, usually so meticulously curated under her watchful eye, was now a testament to chaos. I imagined her in her pristine living room, the darkness a stark contrast to her immaculately maintained domain. Perhaps she was sitting there, staring out at the street, realizing the magnitude of her actions, or maybe she was frantically trying to salvage some semblance of order. Her phone clutched tightly as she attempted to summon an explanation from thin air. A flicker of a smile crossed my face, not one of malice, but of understanding. We had all been caught in her web, spun from threads of rules and expectations. Now, we dangled in the dark, waiting to see if the dawn would bring resolution or further unraveling. As I watched, a figure broke from the cluster of neighbors, moving with a purpose that spoke of determination. It was Mrs. Ellison, the neighborhood's unofficial diplomat. Her presence was calming, like a gentle tide washing over jagged rocks. I could see her speaking, her hands weaving patterns in the air, each movement a promise of reassurance. There was a subtle shift, a recognition of shared circumstance that began to bridge the yawning darkness. It was a small comfort, a reminder that even in the absence of light, connections could be forged. I leaned back, letting the scene unfold, knowing that the night was long but the dawn inevitable. It was a moment of irony, of poetic justice. The neighborhood, so tightly controlled, was now united by the very thing that was meant to divide. And in the end, we all stood equal under the vast, star-strewn sky. The courthouse steps felt cold under the morning sun, a cool reminder of the path I'd chosen. Each step echoed a quiet resolve, a rhythm that underscored the drama of what lay within. The door was heavy, but its weight was nothing compared to the burden of living under HOA Karen's reign. Her petty tyranny had finally reached its crescendo. Walking inside, the air was thick with the sterile scent of legality. Papers rustled like restless leaves in the autumn wind, each one a testament to a grievance aired, a wrong righted. For weeks, I'd been invisible, overshadowed by the boisterous spectacle that was Karen. She was relentless, a self-appointed guardian of neighborhood conformity, a stickler for rules that she wielded with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. But she'd met her match. My silence had been mistaken for acquiescence, my compliance for cowardice. Karen knew the art of the power play but was naive to the subtleties of the legal game. She had pulled the plug on my power, intending to dim my spirit. But instead, she had plunged the entire neighborhood into darkness, an irony so rich it could feed 1,000 poets. Filing the paperwork had required patience and precision. Karen's violation wasn't just a neighborly spat over fence heights or lawn ornaments. It was an assault on autonomy, a breach of privacy, a violation of the very bylaws she so fervently championed. I'd compiled every document, every photograph, and every written complaint, stacking them like a fortress of evidence. As the clerk reviewed my submission, I noticed the clock's hands ticking, marking time with a monotonous certainty. Each tick was a countdown to Karen's undoing. There was no need for grand gestures or public spectacles. The court would handle the theatrics. My role was simple: to set the stage and let justice perform its dance. Leaving the building, the sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the pavement. Shadows, I mused, were not unlike the consequences of our actions, inescapable and ever-present. Karen would learn that soon enough. My thoughts wandered to the neighborhood, now buzzing with the news of the blackout. Whispers and rumors drifted like autumn leaves, each one a piece of the puzzle they could not yet see in its entirety. The power was back on, but the air hummed with an electricity far more potent than any utility could supply. Anticipation crackled like static, charged with the promise of justice. In the days that followed, I kept to my routine, watering the plants, walking the dog, nodding to neighbors who watched me with newfound respect or perhaps fear. Karen, ever the oblivious monarch, continued her rounds, clipboard in hand, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond her perfectly manicured hedges. When the court summons finally arrived at her door, I imagined her shock, the disbelief that would contort her features as she realized her empire was crumbling. A single line echoed in the air, unspoken yet heard by all who witnessed the fall. The rules apply to everyone, even you. In the end, it wasn't the darkness that defeated her, but rather the light of accountability. The irony was delicious. I savored it like a fine wine, letting its complexity linger on the palate. Justice, when served, was a dish best consumed slowly, with gratitude and reflection. And so the neighborhood settled into a new rhythm, one where silence spoke louder than any of Karen's decrees. Peace was a quiet revolution, a gentle reclaiming of autonomy, and that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. The morning sun draped the neighborhood in a golden hue, as if nature herself was trying to restore balance after the chaos Karen had wrought. I watched from my kitchen window, coffee in hand, observing the quiet hum of life returning to its usual rhythm. Children ambled to the bus stop, dragging backpacks behind them like steadfast shadows. Neighbors exchanged friendly waves, their smiles tentative yet hopeful, as if testing the waters of normalcy. It felt like waking from a long, troubled dream. Karen's house, conspicuously silent and seemingly untouched by the sun's warmth, stood as a monument to our recent upheaval. The memory of her scowling face, the single-minded determination to enforce her will, lingered like a storm cloud refusing to dissipate. Yet, her influence had waned, the power she craved slipping through her fingers like sand. The night she cut the power, intending to target only my house, she had inadvertently plunged the entire neighborhood into darkness. Ironic justice, that her attempt to assert dominance backfired spectacularly. The neighborhood had rallied, united by her miscalculation, the shared inconvenience serving as a catalyst for change rather than division. I took a deep breath, remembering how the community came alive that night. Neighbors had spilled into the streets, lanterns and flashlights in hand, laughter echoing against the darkness as they found solace in camaraderie. It was as if the loss of electricity had sparked something brighter, a collective resilience, a refusal to be cowed by one person's pettiness. I had been swept into the tide, joining impromptu gatherings where stories were shared and alliances forged. Over the flickering light of candles, the murmured conversations had turned from frustration to a resolve to reclaim our community from Karen's iron grip. It was unspoken, yet palpable, a silent rebellion against tyranny. Her face, once a constant presence at every meeting, every decision, was now conspicuously absent. I had seen her that morning, peering through her curtains, her eyes narrowed and calculating, a queen without a court, her reign all but over. The day of the HOA vote arrived like the dawn of a new era. The air was thick with anticipation, a sense of an impending shift. In the community hall, neighbors gathered, the atmosphere charged with the electricity that had been restored to our homes but now coursed through our spirits. Karen sat at the front, her expression attempting to convey control, yet there was a tremor in her hands, a twitch at the corner of her mouth. When the votes were counted, the room erupted in murmurs. Her name was nowhere near the top. The relief was palpable, a collective exhalation that seemed to breathe life back into the room. Karen's mask slipped for just a moment, a flicker of disbelief crossing her features before she composed herself, standing to leave with the last shred of dignity she could muster. I watched her go, a sense of closure settling over me. It wasn't satisfaction, nor was it triumph. It was simply peace. The neighborhood had spoken, and in their unity, they'd found power far greater than any one person could wield. As I stepped outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, as if the world itself was celebrating this renewal. The air was cool, the breeze carrying away the remnants of turmoil, leaving a landscape ripe with possibility. Karen's shadow no longer loomed over us. We were free to rebuild, to redefine what it meant to be a community, bound not by rules but by empathy and understanding. As I walked home, the streetlights flickered on, guiding my path, their glow a testament to resilience and the quiet power of unity.